Great. So today, our purposes and outcomes, we're going to do an overview of the 2020 program planning process. We're going to talk about the program proposal and things that you need to know in order to move forward. And of course, one of the most important things is having time to have questions answered. So in case you're new to this process, ACRL committees, division level committees, ACRL sections, ACRL interest groups, and individual ACRL members can submit program proposals. The program planners involved, especially if this is an individual program, it's important to note that you must maintain your ACRL membership throughout the planning cycle. So that includes, when you submit the proposal and then planning through completion next June. All program proposals are peer-reviewed, line peer-reviewed by the Professional Development Committee of ACRL. They are the ones who review everything and make the final decisions. Notifications for those proposals that were selected will be sent out in November of 2019, later this fall. So ACRL is usually allowed approximately 20 programs at each annual conference. That number all depends on the space that is provided in the convention center to ALA. Of course, that can change depending on the city that we're in. So some years we might have 19 programs. This year we actually have 21 in Washington, D.C. So we don't know that number until later on this fall in the process. They give us that number before the PDC makes the final program selection. So we know how many that we can choose. So again, it averages to be about 20 programs a year that can be approved. So programs must address the set criteria, which is outlined in the online FAQ. The link is in your documentation. There is $20,000 available every year for non-librarian speaker expenses. This is money that the ACRL board puts aside every year for programs. So when you submit your program proposal, you will include any sort of budget request that you think you might need for non-librarian speaker expenses. This is a 12-month planning process, so we'll talk about that more, but just so you're aware, it does take a full year to kind of cement everything in place. Those of you who are not part of like a section program planning committee or an interest group planning committee or division level committee, you're planning to submit as an ACRL member. Please select one person to be chair of this program. Sometimes a few individual members come together and want to submit. We just need one contact person for the program, and just be aware that we do call you a program chair. So just like sections have a conference program planning chair, for reference purposes, individual programs also have program planning chairs. And even if you're just one person submitting and you're not having any other colleagues speak with you at the session, you're still called a program chair. Also keep in mind that all approved programs will be audio recorded by ALA. They want to include that content in the virtual conference component. So if your program is accepted, please let your speakers know that it would be really, really great if they would all consent to that requirement, so that they're also given access to provide their presentations in advance into a speaker account, and that way the ALA AV company can sync up all the presentations with the live audio from the sessions and provide that as part of the virtual conference component. So looking ahead to our timeline, hot off the presses, I just got an email earlier today to confirm that the proposal deadline will be September 10th of 2019. Those of you involved in past processes might remember it's been an August deadline for the last few years, which is what we were expecting again. It looks like they pushed the deadline back a couple weeks, which is good news for everyone for a few reasons. But so while I'd had time to update our presentation for today, I didn't yet get to update that timeline document that I emailed you, and which I will of course do, and I'll send the revised timeline out to everyone later today or early tomorrow if possible. So that'll be forthcoming. But again, please note that it's September 10th, and there are no extensions to that deadline. The ALA site, we have no control over it, but the site does close at I think it's 11:59 Central Time on September 10th. So from now until then, you'll be working to finalize your program concept, including any collaborations, and also working to review the proposal site. Again, today they let us know that they're planning to launch the proposal site later this week on June 7th. When the site does launch, I'll of course email all of you who RSVP'd for this session, and also any section program planning chairs. I'll email you to let you know once the site is available. Once the site is available, you can also know that by going to the online FAQ page on the ACRL website that we reference, because I will of course add the link there in a few different places. So you can, even if you don't have my email, you can always find it on the website. And we'll talk more about collaborations later on in this session. So again, September 10, hard deadline for proposals. From in September and October, the ACRL Professional Development Committee will be evaluating all the program proposals. Once they decide on the top 20 or so, however many we're allotted by ALA, they also then look at budget requests, and they make any sort of budget allocations. So very soon after folks are notified if your program was accepted or not, those that requested budget allocations, we then let you know what the PDC allotted to your program as far as financials go. So the goal is by mid-November, if not early November, that email notifications will go out to all the program planners who submitted proposals to let them know whether or not the program was accepted. And then November 18th and 19th, the ALA Conference Committee comes together for a 2-day meeting to look over all of the programs that were approved from all the different ALA divisions, and from the ALA units as a whole, like roundtables and whatnot. And they look at every session, and they are the ones who place programs in the date and time slots for the conference. So we'll talk a little bit later on, but you'll have the opportunity in your proposal form to put in not your first or second choice of dates and times, but you can put in there what restrictions you might have, such as, you know, I am not available to be at conference on Saturday. I really would prefer a Sunday time slot, or the one speaker I would really like to have is not available on Sunday evening, that type of thing. So they take those restrictions into account if your program is accepted. So ALA says that by early December, all of those date and time slots should be solidified and announced. And as soon as I receive that information from ALA, I send it out to the program planners. They also at that time launched the preliminary scheduler online. And you might have noticed if you looked at the current Washington, D.C. scheduler that it only contains programs from December through April pretty much. And then once the ALA launches the full meeting site, like with all the regular committee meetings and discussion group meetings and interest group meetings and forums and such, then they add all that data into the online scheduler in mid-April usually or so. So from December till April, the only content in the online scheduler is the approved programs. Moving on to budgets, again, there's $20,000 each year. And according to the ALA policy, the funding cannot be used for librarian, speaker, travel, or honoraria, and a librarian is anyone who holds an MLS or equivalent degree, or who works in the field of library and information science, which includes faculty in library schools. So in your proposal form, you'll see in the budget section that you can put in the amounts that you think you might need for non-librarian hotel nights, per diem, flights, on-site travel, things like that. I really encourage all program planners to put in the full amount that you think you might need for your non-librarian speaker expenses, especially section program planners who think you might want to consider using some section basic services funding for program expenses. You're absolutely allowed to do that, but what I would suggest is not submitting that into the proposal form, because we can always talk to your section chair later on in the process about adding that funding. So again, please, if you think you might have 2 non-librarian speakers and they might need housing and they might need per diems, even if you're not 100% sure, please do put that in the proposal form, because we can't make any adjustments. Once you submit that proposal and the PDC is reviewing everything, we can't add things at a later point. So please put in what you think you need. And of course, it's not always guaranteed that they can give you everything, but if they don't see that amount, they can't do anything with it. So please do submit that full amount that you think you might need. ACRL division level committees and interest groups each have a yearly allocation of $150. You are able to use that funding for program expenses as well. But again, as I said, for sections, please forget about that until later on in the process, and just submit the funding requests from the PDC in your proposal. Also, something to note that the funding, if you're given funding for your program, it cannot be used to take speakers out for lunches and dinners. That is unless you'd like to use the speaker per diem for that expense. You can use section basic services money for that expense, or committee and interest group allocations to take the group out to lunch or dinner. So related to the program proposal form itself, again, September 10, a really important note I want to emphasize is that we use one proposal site for all ALA unit programs. So the 11 divisions each have their own drop-down menu within the proposal site, as well as ALA has its own drop-down menu. So if you would like to submit under the ACRL umbrella, which would then, your proposal will get reviewed by the ACRL Professional Development Committee, you need to select ACRL from the drop-down menu at the start of the form. Because if you don't select ACRL, if you leave it as a default, it goes into the ALA pool of program proposals, and that gets reviewed by the ALA Program Committee, and that would go up against all the ALA roundtables and the office programs as well. So it's a little tougher actually to get it approved that way. Not to mention that would be more of a general audience. So, and unfortunately, if that mistake is made, we have no way to adjust that and to move it under the ACRL umbrella. So please do remember to choose ACRL at the beginning so that you're included in this pool. Again, I'm going to link the proposal form from the online FAQ. And I will also email it out to all of you. And if you're in this meeting somehow and you didn't RSVP in that SurveyMonkey link, please do so, or send me an email so I can ensure that I have you on my list of interested 2020 program planners. Note that once you start filling out the online proposal form, you can return it any time to edit it up until that September 10th deadline. So that's the nice thing about it. You can log in throughout the summer to check on it. But note, once that you do hit submit at the end, then it does get submitted. So feel free to just save it as you go and then hit submit when you're all done at the end. We won't be in there seeing anything until after the deadline. And also, you have to remember to hit that submit button, because if you don't, it shows as incomplete on our side and we can't convert that over to the export for the PDC. So please do remember at the end to hit submit when you're all done. Things to keep in mind. A few years ago, ALA, you might know, restructured the program process. So the nice thing is they've got all programs in the convention center, which never used to be that way. They were all spread out across the city. So it's nice. They're trying to get as much professional development content in the center as possible to get as many attendees as possible in the session. In order to do that, they had to make all program time slots 1 hour in length. So please note that before you start this process. If your content is, a 3-hour session, it's not going to work here. So please know that before we get started with the process. If you have any questions about that, let me know. The majority of rooms are set up theater style, and rooms cannot be adjusted because they are used for probably 8 sessions throughout the day. So there is usually a limited number of mixed room sets that might have rounds up front and some theater in the back. If that is something that you think is necessary for your session, you're really going to want to put that in as a note in the program proposal form. because otherwise, when we go to schedule all those sessions with the ALA Conference Committee in November, we need to have those notes because that's when those decisions get made. But otherwise, the majority of programs do work with theater-style seating, which is the rows, the room of just rows of seating. As mentioned earlier, if you have any date time restrictions of when you absolutely cannot have your program, or if you chair another committee and you can't have it go up against a forum of theirs, those types of things need to go in the program proposal form as well. ALA Conference Committee assigns the dates and times, and again, those are going to be available in early December. So next steps, of course, please digest all of the information about programs in Chapter 9 of the ACRL Guide to Policies and Procedures and the online FAQ and the timeline. And of course, I will revise that timeline document that I will send out to you by tomorrow. Once the site, the proposal site launches June 7th, please go ahead and go in there and explore a little bit and review it with your committee and let me know if questions come up. So consider a joint program is always something we like to mention because the PDC really encourages collaborations between sections and committees and individuals. An example of that might be two sections which each have a program planning committee. They would team up and do a joint program. This relates to the next bullet down about two types of co-sponsorship. So the first type of co-sponsorship is a jointly sponsored program, and that means the two units or two individuals, they are planning the session together. They are coming up with the content together. They're working with speakers together. If it's sections and they consider using funding from their basic services account, they're each contributing funding. So that's a jointly co-sponsored program. Another really common type of co-sponsorship is called the in-name-only co-sponsorship, and that essentially means that there's one planning unit or one planning person, one submission, and then you would like to ask another unit, like an interest group or a section, to sign on to help you publicize the program. And so that in-name-only co-sponsorship essentially means the unit would get tagged with your program in the online scheduler. So let's say this is a CLS program, and you've asked ULS to be an in-name-only co-sponsor. When you go into the online scheduler next spring, if you search for CLS or ULS, the program would come up under both. So it's essentially a mechanism to help another unit publicize your program. Now there's a limit of 2 in-name-only co-sponsorships per program. You absolutely do not have to have any of these co-sponsorships, but if you do, there's a limit of 2. In order to confirm these in-name-only co-sponsorships, you'll want to note them in your program proposal. And I look at that information, and then we'll actually need written confirmation from the unit that you list in there as an in-name-only co-sponsor. So that's something we'll work on in the fall if the program is approved. But please do put in these types of co-sponsorships in your proposal form. What you'll want to do this summer is seriously think about those types of things, and if you want to move forward with asking, you would want to reach out to, say, the chair of the instruction section or the chair of arts, or reach out to the leadership of that unit to see if they would be interested. It's kind of nice to have that done in the summer and not wait up until the deadline to do that sort of thing. So a simple email confirmation works. But again, that's also something you'll want to be thinking about as you're planning your program this summer. Other options for participating in ALA Annual next summer, of course, there's always ALA posters, which are housed in the exhibit hall. That call for participation usually happens in late fall, early winter, and there's usually a January or February deadline or so for posters. There's a few other options. ALA Conference Services staff manage all the ALA options, so you'll want to reach out to them for questions about those. Excuse me. And then other options with ACRL, of course, I hope many of you were able to join us in Cleveland a few months ago for a really, really wonderful week. We're already gearing up for ACRL 2021 in Seattle. So looking ahead, May of 2020 is when about half of the proposals are due, and then in October, in the fall of 2020, is when the rest of the proposals are due. And once the new conference website is ready to go, it'll be at this link here. And all the details, and the call for proposals, of course, will be going out on all ACRL social media and available online. So that is coming soon. So at this point, I'd like to open up the floor for questions. And excuse me, feel free to type them in the chat box. And thanks to you for a few of you for already typing. Let's see. So Elizabeth, is there a way for us to find out the names of the program chairs of other sections? Yes, great question. So all section program committees have a roster. So if you go to the ACRL website, there's an online directory of leadership. And I will send a link here now. I'm just looking that up. And then actually, if you go to the ACRL homepage, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, in the bottom bar, there's a link for committees, for sections, for interest groups, for discussion group. Those are the links to the actual rosters of leadership. So if you click on the section link, you can see the list of 15 sections. Let's see, if you click on ANSS and you scroll down, you'll see a link for the Conference Program Planning Chicago 2020 Committee. And if you click on that link, you'll see the names of the people who are planning, and all ACRL members, if you log into the website, you can go to all of these rosters and see contact information. So sometimes when you log in, you have to refresh the browser, but all of the rosters have contact information once you log in. So that's just a privacy issue, and that's why you have to log in to see that. But yes, Elizabeth, you can absolutely find the names and contact information, emails for any of the program chairs of sections. Excuse me. So next question, for jointly sponsored program proposal, would each section submit a proposal or do we submit one? Great question. Submit one proposal. Jointly sponsored program, just one proposal. You would work on it together. You would pick one person to go into the site and submit it under their name as the contact. But yes, just one proposal, because more than one would cause confusion. Pamela, if jointly sponsoring a program, does each section request funding? So, good question. If you're jointly sponsoring a program, you would submit one proposal, and that proposal should include a budget request for the Professional Development Committee to review. Excuse me, let me drink some water. If for some reason the PDC does not approve the full amount you requested, or if you get into the process and you realize, oh, we do need some more funding, you can ask each section to contribute money from their basic services funding. Usually if it's a joint program and section funding is needed, the section splits the costs between the two. But again, the last few years, we actually haven't had to use much section basic services funding because a lot of the section program planning chairs have realized, hey, if we just submit our funding request to the PDC, a lot of times they're able to grant those requests. The maximum amount of funding is $1,000. No, there's not a maximum amount of funding in writing. The idea is that usually about $1,000 is definitely the maximum per speaker. Total, that's like expenses and per diem and things like that. So related to speaker expenses, it all depends on how far they're coming from, of course, what their flight allocation might be. I'm happy to talk with you if you have questions about that, but for the proposal form itself, the definitely standard things are the per diem is always $50 a day, and the hotel is always $200 a night. Those are ALA standard rates. So, but otherwise, you know, if you have local speakers in Chicago, you would maybe only need to ask for, you know, $50 for parking and gas money, things like that. But if you're flying somebody in from California, you'd want to look up just some sample flight rates online and then submit that for your proposal. So Samantha, where on the form do we put in joint sponsorship information, since we can only select one section when submitting, in the proposal, description, or somewhere else? Okay, so when you submit, you can only select one division or unit. So you'll select ACRL, and then towards the end of the form, there's some spaces to add in the units that are involved. So I think there's 2 or 3 open-ended text boxes where you can put in, hey, this is a DLS program, and we're going to have in-name-only co-sponsorships from IS, or this is a joint ANSS and LES program. The 2 planning committees are working together. This is a joint section program. So that's towards the end of the proposal form where you can put in that information, but definitely only submit 1 proposal and make sure you choose ACRL from the drop-down. Do we need to have speaker confirmation by the time we submit a proposal? Another good question. You do not. Some of the other units that accept proposals within the association require that. ACRL does not require that. If you have that information, it's great to include. Or some proposals will say, we are looking for a professor of anthropology specializing in this subject for our program. They'll put that in the description, and that's fine. You don't have to have your speaker and speakers confirmed until later this fall for an ACRL program. So, and that actually gets into winter by the time our deadline kind of gets more firm. So having a general idea is great, but you don't have to have people lined up. A lot of times some speakers can't even commit until they know the exact date and time of your program. So we understand that. And since we don't always get those times and dates from ALA until December, the final speaker deadline for us, for ACRL, is usually in mid to late January, and I can work with you on that as well. I also want to mention for those of you who might be individual ACRL members thinking about submitting. So when you go into the proposal site and you choose ACRL, the next screen will ask you, are you submitting as an ACRL individual member, or are you submitting as an ACRL unit, like a section or interest group? Please, please, please put in that you're an ACRL member or individual member, and not list perhaps some of the sections that you might be involved in. That causes confusion on our end when, say, might look like we have 4 proposals from the arts section, when actually only the Arts Program Planning Committee is supposed to submit for the arts section itself. If you're an arts member and you're submitting on your own, that's perfectly fine. You'll want to put in there that you're just an ACRL member submitting, or an individual ACRL member, either term works. And then under the co-sponsor information, you can put, I might consider asking the arts section to in-name only co-sponsor my program, or I might consider asking ULS to in-name only co-sponsor my program. But just to try to be more clear when submitting about if you're actually from a section program planning committee, or if you're a section member wanting to submit individually. They're both perfectly fine. We're just trying to make it as clear as possible. Otherwise, it causes a lot of detective work on my end, trying to figure those things out during the review process. Those are great questions. And also, you should all know this from the documentation, but I just do want to mention that the proposals are accepted from all the different ACRL units and individual members are reviewed. It's a blind peer review, so they're all reviewed at the same level. The PDC does not see who is submitting, so just something to note. Any other questions? Another thing, if you're a section program planning chair, please do go to your roster on the ACRL website for your section and make sure you're working with the most current group of members, because some section vice chairs are still in the appointment system finishing up some appointments. So we just want to make sure that you've got everybody who's on the committee working with you from the start. Don't want anybody left off just because they might have been a little bit of a late addition. Okay, Pam, yeah, if your roster's incorrect, feel free to work with your vice chair to fix it and email me. I know I've got a few appointment emails I'm still going through to fix things, but yes. Oh, I like the speed dating webinar. That's a great idea. Yeah, and Elizabeth is a great idea. We actually used to do that. I did it for many years, and I kind of had like an open office hours, a few of them. And for about 4 years running, no one came, and so we stopped that idea. But yeah, I used to do that. And the thing is, some people just switch to, the rosters are online. If you're wanting to collaborate with another section, you can simply log into the website, find the person's information on the roster, and email them. That's kind of just how things moved. And a lot of that communication does happen, during the summer and this time. And then you're all ready to go for the fall for the program proposal deadline. Any other questions? If you think of something later, you're always welcome to email me. I'm of course on the slide for questions, and my wonderful colleague Margot Conahan also works with me on programs. You can email one of us or both of us, but we're available to help you. And again, I will be working over the next day to get all the online documentation updated about that September 10 deadline. So again, no longer an August deadline, which is nice, gives you a little more time. And then I will update our Word document of the timeline and send it out to all of you as interested program planners. So if there are no other questions, I think we can go ahead and close out. But I really want to thank you all so much for tuning in. And it's really important to get everyone on the same page at the start. There's so many fun details to be aware of with this process. So thank you all so much, and best of luck on your proposals.